We've seen how formulas and functions can use values from other worksheets, not just the worksheet that they currently exist in. We're going to take that idea one step further and look at 3D referencing. If we take the sales data sheet 2013, you'll see that we have some data for January, February, March, etc. And then we have QTR1 and QTR2 further down the line. What we would like in the QTR1, so the first quarter, is the summary of cars sold broken down by each region for each of the 3 months. So we start here knowing what we know, which is to put an equals sign, the sheet we would like, the cell we would like. Now previously we've pressed return, but we're actually going to go with a plus because I want to add on another cell, and that cell is February, cars sold for the north. Then another plus, March. Now you can see the formula building at the top here, Jan exclamation mark B3 plus Feb exclamation mark B3 plus March exclamation mark B3. That's all the ones I want, so I press return. And that brings me back, and we have 735 cars sold. Now the idea behind 3D referencing is to actually make this formula a lot shorter than it currently is. The only way that 3D referencing works though is if the sheets you are effectively trying to add up must be made up in exactly the same way. So they must be identical. So if we want to add up Jan, Feb, March using the 3D referencing idea, then the sheets must be the same. And effectively we know they're laid out the same, and we're trying to add here the same cell, B3, from each of those sheets. So what I could do is replace this formula with an equals sum, because I want to add up. I need to keep the January, but I don't need the B3 and I don't need the February. But what I need is a colon. I don't need that exclamation mark, but I do need the last one. And then I keep B3. Now let me close the brackets just to show the formula is complete, and have a look in the formula bar here. It's equals sum, so that's our function we would like to add up, open brackets, go from January to March, that's why the colon is there. Exclamation mark tells it that Jan and March are actually sheet names, and then we'd like B3 from each of the sheets that exist between January and March inclusive. Now there are only 3 months, so there's only February in between, but it doesn't matter how many sheets are in between Jan and March, they will get picked up as long as when you place them effectively on top of each other, B3 is, in our case, the number of cars sold for the north. So when I press return, we should find the same answer, 735. And hey presto, we do. So the logic there is equals the function, so whatever we're trying to do, open brackets, the first sheet name, colon, the last sheet name, exclamation mark, just to tell Excel we're dealing with sheet names, and then the cell or cells, because you can select a range in this way, that you would like to add up. Now, because everything is relative, I can take that formula and drag it down to the west, and I get cars sold for the south. You see it's moved to B4. And if we look at the west, we can see it's moved to B6. So happily dealing relatively, I can then take those cells and drag them to the right. But just before we do that, you'll have noticed that our formatting has gone awry here, because we've copied this cell here, which has got the formula in fine, but it's also got a bold solid line at the top of it. So now the ones below it have. So let's just do undo to take us back. This time when we drag down, I'm going to drag but with the right mouse button. And when I let go, I've got an option to fill without formatting. That way it'll keep the formatting of the destination cells. So fill without formatting, I get the same results, but I retain my dot dash blue line. I can then take these 4 cell formulas and drag them across to get the plane sold and the bike sold totals. Again, I'm going to drag them with the right mouse button. So we go down to the fill handle, but with the left. We see we get the little black cross, and at that point you click the right, and you'll notice that the cursor changes shape. Don't be perturbed, keep going, drag and drag, let go, and fill without formatting again. So the right click and drag is giving me this choice menu. That retains my formatting, but brings the formula across. So that's now selecting from January to March, C4. And C4 is my plane sold in the south. So that's 3D referencing. We're going to look at one more little example, which has more sheets in its range. If we look at sales data 2015 in your working folder, you'll see we have a sales summary sheet that is looking to do the same thing. Add up the car sold, plane sold, bike sold, but not just for a quarter now, for the whole year. So I could start here and do equals sum, open brackets, Jan, dec, assuming the last sheet is called dec. Or I'm going to show you an alternative method of selecting those sheets. So we still start equals sum. I want to add these cells up, open brackets. I then click on the first sheet in the range, bring in the last sheet into view and do a shift click on the last sheet. And you'll see in the formula bar how my formula is now building Jan, dec, exclamation mark. These single apostrophes that Excel has placed there are only required if there are any spaces in your sheet name, but because we've used the mouse to pick up the sheets, Excel's placed them in for me. And then I click on the cell that I want, which happens to be B3, and then return. We visit the formula, and we can see it's picked up Jan, dec, exclamation mark, B3. No need for the apostrophes, but you will need them if your sheet names have spaces in them. Logically, everything's in the same relative position. Notice that the result isn't. Although I'm asking for January to dec B3, the result is going into C2. So it doesn't matter where the result goes. What matters with 3D referencing is that the cells you are trying to add up are all in the same place. So the sheets January to December must be identical. Obviously the values differ, but the layout must be identical. We now know that that is the correct formula and everything's now in the same relative position. So I can take that cell there, do copy rather than drag, so that I can highlight all of the cells in one go and paste. So we go to paste, click the little drop down, and we are given our paste options. Let's choose paste special. And we see we have over here the option for formulas and number formats. Okay. And that retains the number formatting, whatever that might have been. So the decimal places, any currency symbols, etc. But none of the other formatting is replaced, so none of the dots and dashes. So that's 3D referencing. Remember that the cells that you're selecting must be identical on each sheet. If you've got that in place, then there is no restriction on the number of sheets that you can actually pick up in that range in a 3D reference. The first sheet, the last sheet, exclamation mark, the cell or cells you then require.